Hi, everybody. It is Jim Himes here. It is just after 1 o'clock, and we are going to start a Facebook Live momentarily. We'll let some people join in. Thank you for joining. My objective today is to talk a little bit about what happened in Washington this week with the unprecedented second impeachment of the president. And where we likely go from here. I know there's a lot of questions about a Senate trial and that sort of thing. And talk a little bit about what you're going to see next week, which of course is hopefully going to be no more exciting than the inauguration of a new president on January 20th. But what's important about that, of course, is what we're likely to see right out of the box by the new Biden administration. I'm going to try to keep this crisp. In our last Facebook Live, I think I went on for about half an hour, so I'm going to try to keep this crisp and welcome as many of your questions as I can. I do want to start, and by the way, just so you know why I do this, I love town hall meetings and have done dozens and dozens and dozens of them over the years, but obviously that's not an option under these COVID conditions. So this is a pale substitute, but an important one nonetheless. And let me start also very quickly with an important announcement, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the topic, which is the changing vaccine protocols here in the state of Connecticut. And the reason I'm not going to get in depth on those things is that the policies and protocols for vaccinations here in the state of Connecticut are a state determined activity. Not a federally determined activity. But there is important news, which is that there was an announcement very recently that the definition of the 1B priority, that is to say the people who I think right now actually are starting to get vaccines, has now been expanded to include people over the age of 75, people with a single comorbidity, and I believe people in congregate living arrangements. And so, again, we will post on this Facebook Live the phone number and the website where you can go to get more information. But that's really important, which is why I bring it up. It's important, of course, because the way we defeat this virus is by continuing to do what Connecticut has done really quite well. Observing all the social distancing and wearing a mask and the appropriate quarantining, but we also beat this thing when we get herd immunity, which is going to happen when we get a lot of people vaccinated. Connecticut, by the way, is doing terrifically well. We are up near the top of the list of states in terms of actually getting the vaccine into people's arms. I don't know the current numbers today, but I do know that we're doing terrifically well on that. And therefore, the role you can play is to take a look at the website or call the number that we will put on this Facebook Live. It is a ct.gov driven thing. And make sure that if you are or if you know people who qualify under 1B, the priority, that you or those individuals get vaccinated. Okay, all right. I am going to try to keep this crisp. So let's go to the meat of what I had wanted to talk about today, and hopefully most of your questions are centered around, which is what happened this week. I don't need to review, and I did do a Facebook Live subsequent to the insurrection which occurred a week ago Wednesday. Needless to say, the consensus around what happened has formed that there was a massive security failure. There will be multiple in-depth investigations of what occurred. We are now learning that while most of the people who breached the Capitol and participated in the insurrection were the more aggressive and angry and violently inclined of President Trump supporters, there actually were individuals, off-duty law enforcement, off-duty military veterans who had gotten together to actually plan quasi-operations, if you will. And so the sentiment amongst my colleagues is that what occurred last Wednesday was actually considerably more dangerous than simply a group of protesters who got out of control. So that will be the subject of a lot of investigation. Which brings me to the impeachment of the president, which occurred yesterday. There was a single count of impeachment. The count was on supporting insurrection against the United States. Interestingly enough, in contrast to the first time this president was impeached about a year ago, there were actually 10 Republicans who supported that impeachment. There were others who supported it, but you may have seen the news stories were terrified at going back to their home districts had they been identified as one of those Republicans on the record supporting impeachment. So the number was more than 10. What was interesting about the 10, and I'm not going to go too deep into the politics here, that's not what this conversation is about, but the 10 included people from purple districts, but it also included, of course, Liz Cheney, who's the number 3 ranking leader in the Republican conference in the House of Representatives. And it didn't just include Liz Cheney. If you read her statement, it's a remarkable statement in which she says she can think of no greater betrayal by a president of his oath of office than what occurred with President Trump. So you see there, you don't get a lot more establishment Republican than Liz Cheney, daughter of a vice president and number 3 leader in the Republican conference, and 10 total. I voted for the impeachment without much reservation whatsoever. The actions of the president were plain. He put my life and the life of senators and congressmen at risk. His fomenting of this insurrection resulted in 5, maybe 6 fatalities, one being a suicide shortly thereafter. And we see the damage that this has done to our sense of ourselves and what the world thinks of us. I was just on a totally other topic on the phone with the British ambassador to the United States, and I can say confidently that the world was really shocked by what they saw in the country that they believe is the leading democracy, most powerful democracy on the planet. Okay, so where do we go from here? And then I will turn to questions. I saw one question already, which is, will the president be removed from office? I thought the answer to that question last week was no. Today I'm ever more sure of that question, of his not being removed before the inauguration, because the vice president, Michael Pence, credit to him for actually abiding by the law on that horrible day and playing the role that he is legally required to play. But he has indicated that he will not consider exercising his authority under the 25th Amendment to remove the president. And Mitch McConnell has said that the Senate's not going to do any business before the 19th of January. So is this president removed? I think the probability of that is pretty close to 0. Which leads us to, where then does the impeachment go? Here's where I have to give my custom qualifier that I'm not a lawyer, but I've been certainly looking at what the lawyers are saying about whether a president can be impeached after his term is over. The answer to that question appears to be yes. The logic for that, and I need to think this through because I am reacting on the fly the way many of you are. The logic for that is really twofold. One, clear accountability, a conviction in the Senate, which, let's face it, is unlikely because it requires a 2/3 vote by the Senate, and I don't see how you get whatever the number would be, 16 or 17 Republican senators to vote for it. Although I would tell you that that's not impossible when Mitch McConnell is sort of indicating that he might be supportive of it. The reason to do a trial in the Senate, of course, would be about accountability, and it would be about a conviction also removing the possibility that Donald Trump would run for any federal office again. The words are very clear in the Constitution that can be one of the penalties imposed if an impeached individual is convicted in the Senate. I referenced some ambivalence I have about that. I am all about accountability. What the president did was awful, and I had no misgivings whatsoever about voting for his impeachment. I'm very gratified that the people who committed violent acts in the Capitol are being arrested and will soon be prosecuted, and many of them will spend time in jail. So I'm all about accountability. But a trial, remember, after January 20th, the United States Senate has to confirm hundreds of Biden nominees. And that's deadly serious, much more so today than ever before, because our healthcare leaders and our national security leaders have really got to be operating from job one, from moment one, I should say. And I also, needless to say, am hopeful that the Senate very early on in Joe Biden's term will accomplish some things for the American people, including what is being announced today by President-elect Joe Biden, which is a COVID stimulus, and I hope right behind that is a infrastructure proposal, which would both obviously solve a lot of our problems here in southwestern Connecticut, but also serve as an economic stimulus. And there is a very real risk that, and I know we'll be overusing the metaphor of walking and chewing gum at the same time, but to some extent, Senate attention and Senate energy is a zero-sum game. So we'll see where that goes. And I can't comment further than that. That really is ultimately up to the United States Senate and what they do, presumably in consultation with Joe Biden. Okay, so that's what I know. I will now answer a bunch of your questions. I've instructed my staff to make sure that I don't miss any, but if I do, I will try to come back and get them answered for you on this medium or others. Okay, so number one, how likely is it that Trump will be removed from office? I addressed that already. I would put the probability at pretty close to 0% for the reasons that I talked about before. Why didn't you co-sponsor the articles of impeachment? Good question. I voted, as I've told you now several times, enthusiastically for the impeachment. It was, in my opinion, the most egregious act that a president has committed that has deserved impeachment. Richard Nixon was pretty bad with the Watergate break-in. Bill Clinton was pretty bad. Andrew Johnson, I can't tell you I had personal experience with that, but that was pretty bad. But actually inciting insurrection against the government of the United States is as bad as it gets. And there was no way in my mind that the Congress could not act. The reason I didn't co-sponsor the article of impeachment, I've struggled with this hard for the last couple of days, is that I wanted to register a small and yes, maybe lame note of concern for what is about to happen to our country because of what we did. And again, let me say it again, what we did was the right thing to do, and I did it proudly. But we now, because we impeached without the traditional process, without evidence and hearings and committee action, we have now established a precedent that impeachment will be used without any of the traditional process, quite frankly, against every president from here on out. One of my new and rather explosive colleagues from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Williams, has already said that on January 21st, she's introducing articles of impeachment against Joe Biden. That's silly, but it is in those moments, in my opinion, that you are most sure and most committed to a course of action that you really need to go with process. Just because we see a crime committed with our very own eyes doesn't mean that we dispense with indictment and a trial, etc. Now, at the end of the day, I set those concerns aside and did what I did. But I am saddened by the precedent that has been established. We were put, and by the way, I don't blame the Democratic leadership. I don't blame the Democrats. We were put in this box where we were presented with behavior that was beyond impeachable. And by the way, a lot of my Republicans acknowledge that publicly today, so I don't want to argue whether it is or is not. And we were presented with that with a very, very short period of time, and we did what we did. But anyway, that was my small raising of the hand of sadness around the precedent that has been established. Okay, question number 3. Why is your condemnation of the Capitol stronger than your condemnation of BLM protests? Okay, I'm glad that question came up because we got to get out of that framing. I have from moment one, and I will continue to do so, say without any reservation or condition at all that violence is wrong, regardless of who perpetrates it. That breaking the law is wrong, regardless of who does it. So I understand that if you're a Republican and you don't like Jim Himes, you believe that I have been harder on what was a presidentially inspired insurrection against the government of the United States than I have been about a courthouse that was assaulted in Seattle or Portland. Violence is wrong, full stop. And I have never been anything other than clear in saying that. But I've got 2 things to say. Number 1, there is a radical difference between a presidentially inspired insurrection against the United States government and an anarchist or a criminal or whoever it might be committing violence on the streets of Portland or St. Louis or anywhere else. And quite frankly, if you don't see that difference, I'm not terribly interested in having the debate with you. But, and here's the important point, we don't let 3-year-olds, and many of us are parents, excuse their behavior because he's doing it or she's doing it. we don't, in a court of law, in a kindergarten, or anywhere else, say that it's okay to do bad things because somebody else is doing bad things. And I can't tell you how, you can tell I'm a little animated about this, that in the Congress of the United States, I listen to people saying, well, what about Portland? Well, what about Ferguson? Well, what? Folks, if this is the degree of moral scrutiny that we apply to actions, which is that an insurrection against the Capitol is justified by a courthouse attacked in Portland, we're doomed. We're doomed. So don't do it. Get away from the framing. If you want to attack me, God bless you. Not physically, I should be very clear about that. If you want to disagree with me, God bless you. I will welcome you into the conversation. But do it this way. Say, Jim Himes, you are wrong on healthcare. You know, Jim Himes, I disagree with your climate change policy. Don't tell me that I am somehow associated through my party with BLM protesters in Portland, whose violence I have roundly condemned. And it's not about me. It's just that is no way to have a political discussion in the greatest democracy in the country. All right, we're going to leave that one behind. I'm going to climb off the soapbox there. I need to move a little quicker here on the questions because there are a lot of them. Do you have any insight into when $2,000 checks will be in legislation after the inauguration? Will the impeachment trial delay it? My best guess, folks, is I haven't actually seen what Biden is proposing today. But my best guess for you, based on what I hear from the leadership and what I think may be in that Biden legislation, is that there will be a provision for $2,000 checks in fairly near-term legislation. I don't want to give you the false hope that it's absolutely going to pass, because remember, even when Democrats control the Senate, and I'm going to probably say this a lot in the coming weeks and months, Democrats will control the Senate very narrowly. And so legislation like this, unless it's done under something called reconciliation, which is a sort of esoteric parliamentary process that I won't get into right now, will require 60 votes today. Now, I know we're going to have a long conversation about the filibuster, but anyway, I'm just giving you a little bit of a warning here that just because it's proposed doesn't necessarily mean it will pass. But I do think it's going to be out of the box quite early. Will members of Congress found to be encouraging the coup be expelled? Again, you're asking me to predict the future here. I will tell you this. And there's a lot of rumors out there and there's a lot of videos, and I would be cautious with all of you about jumping to conclusions based on videos that you see on Twitter or Facebook or whatever it may be. But if there were members of Congress who conspired with the violent actors of last Wednesday, I will not rest until they are expelled. Again, it comes back to what I said earlier, right? You know, a member of Congress has immense authority and the immense privilege of going to the floor of the House of Representatives and articulating ideas. If your version of your job is that you conspire with violent criminals to make a political point, you have no business whatsoever in the Congress of the United States. And I do suspect that the vast majority of my colleagues feel the same way. So we'll see what the investigation shows. Okay, more questions here. What can I tell you? What can you tell us about the preparations to keep the State House in Hartford safe? I can't tell you a lot other than, and I would encourage you to be in touch with your state representatives and your state senators to get that kind of information. I do know that because I speak to the governor fairly frequently, that he is taking this threat very, very seriously, the threat that there could be, I guess it's the 17th and the 20th, violent protests. And I can tell you, because I just got back from Washington last night, that and it makes me very sad, but the Capitol looks like an armed camp right now. There are thousands of armed National Guardsmen, fences everywhere. It's a very sad sight, but I feel like the probability that what happened last Wednesday is going to happen on inauguration is very, very low. Can Trump be convicted in the Senate after President Biden has taken the oath of office? I addressed this before. The legal consensus and the precedent seems to be that yes, he could be. As a matter of law, whether he would be as a matter of 2/3 votes in the Senate, of course, is a different question. I would watch Mitch McConnell very closely on that one. This is not the forum to get into politics, but Mitch McConnell was in no way, shape, or form denigrating the House impeachment of Donald Trump. So that's an interesting fact to consider as we move forward. What are you doing about the increasing censorship by many social media monopolies? A good and big question. Although I'm not sure the words are quite right, right? I think of censorship as when the government says you can't say this, you can't say that, which of course is prohibited under our First Amendment. And I should add that please don't enter into the debate saying that Twitter or Facebook is violating First Amendment rights. The First Amendment is a restriction on the government, federal, state, and local, around inhibiting your freedom of expression. There is no rule that says that Twitter or Facebook or your family or University of Connecticut or any, well, actually University of Connecticut is a state affiliated entity, but anyway, my point is that there is no rule that says that a private entity, a private corporation, a family, what have you, can't put restrictions on who gets to use their platform. But nonetheless, the question is a valid one. And while I've been annoyed by a number of the things that the American right has pointed out in the last week or so, it is a fair question. Why does Donald Trump have his Twitter account suspended, but Ayatollah Khamenei, the grand Ayatollah of Iran, does not? I don't have a good answer for that question except to say this, which is, and this is true in law as it is, I would hope it would be in Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, which is if you are inciting violence, you should not get any form of platform at all. And a lot of what the president did via his social media was to incite violence. Again, the quote that rings in my mind is, "You need to go and fight or you won't have a country anymore." But the question is a really good one, and I would refer you, I haven't studied it, but I would refer you to a Twitter thread that Jack Dorsey, who's the CEO of Twitter, put up yesterday. You can find it. If you're not on Twitter, get your friends or your kids to show you. They're obviously thinking about it, and look, let me. This is a huge topic that is worthy of an hour-long conversation. But let me say what I have said in this forum before, which is, it's a hard problem. Some stuff is not hard. Incitement of violence, no way, no how. But when people make calls for Twitter and Facebook and Instagram to take the president off or take Donald Trump Jr. off or whatever it may be, what you're basically doing is you're saying, I'm okay with Mark Zuckerberg and his buddies or Jack Dorsey and his buddies deciding for me what information I see. And you may agree or disagree with that, but at least give that some thought. I will never, under the First Amendment, tolerate government censorship, and I'm not sure I feel a heck of a lot better about just fully endorsing Mark Zuckerberg censorship, whatever. And again, it's not, you get my point here. I'm not sure I want those guys and a bunch of their friends deciding what I see and don't see. Okay, let's move on to some additional questions. Why can't the Senate meet to convict prior to the 20th? Theoretically, the Senate could meet to convict prior to the 20th. It would actually meet to hold a trial. Don't know whether it would convict or not. But Mitch McConnell has said he's not going to do it. And so it's not that they can't, it's that they won't. Is it possible to recruit Liz Cheney to join the team prosecuting impeachment? So Nancy Pelosi named the impeachment managers. Needless to say, Liz Cheney was not amongst them. No, it's not possible. She's not going to do that. What she did was courageous enough in my mind, and very much put at risk her position as the number 3 leader in the Republican conference in the House. So again, that's not going to happen. Fun to contemplate. What about the impeachment of you? Should I be impeached? Well, every 2 years, you get to decide whether I keep my job. As a matter of law, no, you can't impeach me. I am not actually technically or constitutionally a federal officer. I can be expelled from the House of Representatives, and there's plenty of precedent for expelling members and senators, but members and senators are not impeached. So I won't be impeached, but if you feel strongly about it, you can always ask a representative to introduce a motion for my expulsion, and we'll see where that goes. Are you concerned that some of the National Guard currently stationed at the Capitol may incite violence in the next week? 10 days ago, I would have said, no, I have no concern whatsoever. I'm a little more careful, maybe a little bit more jaded. a little bit more cynical, sadly. So my answer is not an unqualified no, I'm not concerned. I am concerned, but not dramatically so. Look, my presumption is that our soldiers who have taken an oath to support and defend the Constitution are going to do the right thing. And needless to say, part of what happened last week was a complete breakdown of the chain of command. Police commanders were not present. Blah blah blah. So again, I'm not going to say it quite as adamantly as I would have 10 days ago, but I'm not overly concerned that we're going to have a problem with the armed soldiers who are there right now. Why should we expect to heal the nation when the rabid dogs of the... Okay, I really try not to trade in inflammatory rhetoric at this point, so let me rephrase this question. Why should we expect to heal the nation when the far right refuses to heal? It's a little bit what I just said about please don't try to excuse the behavior of the president because you were angry by what you saw in the courthouse, and that they do it too, is not a moral defense. Look, I over the years have heard from a lot of angry supporters that when they go low, we need to stop going high. We need to go low as well. And I understand why people come at it from that angle. But I want you to think about a country where that is the prevailing ethic of everybody, that we always just take it down another notch. Maybe I feel particularly passionately about this because I do think my life was in very real danger last week. I know it was. I was there. And I just want us to look. I fight for re-election every 2 years. I have no problem with really vigorous debate. But I just don't want my country to go to a place where everybody is willing to take it down the next notch into the gutter. Okay. And by the way, on the question of healing, having irritated some activists in what I last just said, I had to sit in the chamber yesterday and listen to people like Jim Jordan say that this impeachment would be divisive and that it wouldn't heal. Well, fortunately, I was able to keep my lunch in my stomach. But let's also be very clear. I do think healing is important, but healing is not a substitute for accountability. The way you heal, and this is, by the way, true in human relations, is you're honest about what happened. There is accountability. Then hopefully there is forgiveness and you move on. So the idea, particularly coming from somebody like Jim Jordan, who has spent the last 4 years, brutally dividing this country, that we should all of a sudden turn our attention to healing is disgusting. Instead, what we will do is we will demand accountability for the people responsible for this. And once we have accountability, then I'll be the first guy in line. And my constituents know I will be the first in line to say, let's get this back together and let's get some things done for the country. More questions here. Why are members of Congress who refuse to go through the metal detectors allowed inside? Okay. Sometimes this turns into a constitutional thing. They are allowed inside because the law and the Constitution makes it pretty clear that there is no legal way to stop a member of Congress on their way to vote. Why is that? That is because at various points in our history, the constabulary of South Carolina might have had an interest in stopping a member of Congress from getting to Washington, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just reporting the facts here, folks. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good idea. I'm the guy on the floor with that new representative from Colorado who I assume is armed. But that's the reason. It is not at all clear that anybody has the authority to stop a member of Congress from going to the floor of the House of Representatives. Now, what you did see, and this made me very, very happy, is that Nancy Pelosi has imposed very large fines on members who refuse to go through the metal detectors. I'm very sad about those metal detectors, but I'm very happy that it will be very, very expensive for my friends who did that yesterday, to do it again. And by the way, the fines are going to be deducted from salaries. So anyway, my guess is we're going to see better compliance going forward on the metal detectors. Okay, I'm going to move through these questions a little bit more rapidly. I don't want to bore you folks. Are we going to hear more about the answers to Representative Mikey Sherrill's inquiry about those reconnaissance tours? Yes, you will. Look, there are allegations, and they are allegations, that some members might have invited people into the Capitol, shown them around. This, by the way, is a standard thing, happens all the time. If those members showed those people around in order to familiarize them with the location of offices in the Capitol or to help reconnoiter the Capitol, those members need to be expelled. But yes, there will be an investigation of that, and we will learn more. And if that was done, that would be, along with the fatalities, some of the worst that we would have seen. But again, I emphasize that they are allegations at this point to be investigated. If Democrats are going to have the Senate, why can't we call them back next week after Georgians get sworn in and vote Trump out now? So, folks, the answer to that question is that Georgia is likely to certify on the 18th or the 19th of January. And so if we assume it's the 19th, there's a bunch of procedural falderall. This is, after all, the United States Senate, where Chuck Schumer will become the majority leader. So just again, as a matter of logistics, because Georgia won't certify until probably the 19th, you are unlikely to see impeachment action in the Senate prior to then. What are we going to do regarding the pre-inaugural activities from these pro-Trump groups? Any actions from the feds to prevent violence? I've sort of touched on that. Again, law enforcement has woken up. The Capitol Police, lots of others, FBI, and we're going to find out sort of who said what to whom and how it happened. But there's a lot of egg on a lot of people's faces, and I'm here to tell you, because I saw it yesterday, that the security is overwhelming. It looks like our embassy in Beirut a little bit, which again makes me sad that it has to be that way, but is going to obviously serve as protection. You've probably seen that the mall will be off limits to the public. There is a perimeter, 2 perimeters around the Capitol. Frankly, what I worry more about is not so much that these violent, aggressive groups are going to get into the Capitol. I think that's going to be very, very hard. I worry more about what their frustration may lead them to do in a place like Arlington, Virginia, if they wind up in a bar, pissed off that they can't get into Washington. And so for all of us, from now until things calm down, hopefully in late January, all of us really need to, stay alert, because there's probably going to be some pretty frustrated people around throughout the country. Okay, are you worried about the president pardoning the whole group of rioters from last week? Yes, I'm very worried about that. That would be sort of a disgusting and fitting end to the presidency, where he would be on his way out and pardon people who, on camera, in many instances, committed grave crimes against our republic. But of course, the pardon power, folks, I think most of you know this, is unconditional. It's unqualified. It's in the Constitution. About the only way you're going to go after a president for exercising a pardon is if it's done corruptly. If somebody pays the president for a pardon. Other than that, it's a constitutional authority. The story I heard, and I hate trading in things that I haven't verified, but the story I heard is that there's a long conversation happening inside the White House about whether the president should pardon himself, and that he's been told that he shouldn't pardon himself, and that because of that, given his personality, he's saying, well, if I can't have a pardon, nobody gets a pardon. But again, those are just what I hear from people with contacts inside the White House. How will you prevent the president from disclosing classified information at home and abroad now or after his term ends? Again, I feel like I'm the bearer of bad news on a lot of this stuff. It's unprecedented, but the president is, legally speaking, what's known as the declassifying authority. So if he wants to, he could declassify information that is sensitive. He could not probably be held to account for that. If he sold information that was classified, he could be prosecuted for that. After he's president, he no longer enjoys any insulation from prosecution, and an ex-president who discloses classified information could be prosecuted for doing that. That's what I know. Okay. Did you know that one can't get any SBA PPP loan grant without a credit score of 570? Okay, we're going to take that under advisement. My crew that is watching this, that is news to me. The PPP loans are made to businesses, not to individuals. But I'm going to ask my staff to follow up with you, because I don't I could be wrong, but I think you may have misinformation, which is really important to correct because PPPs, by the way, will be newly available to everybody on Tuesday at all of the banks. So we'll get you an answer on that. You told Nicole Wallace your staff was working from home on the 6th. She did not ask why did you choose to have them work from home that day. Well, that's not a hard one. We knew that there were going to be protests, and my staff functions almost 100% from home, and I didn't want them at risk. And I also didn't want to worry about them were I to find myself in a mess. So that was a very easy decision. I have generally, not that you ask this, but I have generally in the course of the last 5 months had my staff working from home. When I'm in Washington and we're not under a situation like we were last week, I will often have one staffer in the office just to assist me with what I need. But wasn't a hard decision because we knew that there were going to be protests, and we certainly didn't know that what was going to happen happened, but that was an easy decision for me, and I'm very glad we made it. Okay, if Trump is not convicted, can Congress pass a separate law banning him from office? Very good question. I don't actually know the answer to that question. This is one of those rare moments where I regret not going to law school, but we'll try to get you an answer to that question. Why doesn't someone just arrest the president for inciting insurrection? So for better or for worse, you can't just arrest the president. And more to the point, there is an opinion that stands from what is known as the Office of Legal Counsel, which says that a sitting president cannot be prosecuted while being a sitting president. Now we could spend 2 hours on that conversation with lots of lawyers more smarter about it than I am, but that is the prevailing legal opinion, that a sitting president cannot be prosecuted. Why? Because the constitutional remedy for presidential misbehavior is the remedy that we exercised yesterday, impeachment. And the theory is that if the president commits a criminal offense, the president would be impeached, removed from office, and then could suffer prosecution for whatever criminal act that president undertook. Okay, we're going to do a couple more here, and then we're going to wind up. What are the top 3 agenda items from the Biden administration that the House will support and create? I don't want to speak for the Biden administration, but what I can tell you for sure is that the number one item on the Biden administration's mind on noon, January 20th, is COVID. And very, very, very quickly, the new president will make sure that leaders are installed at all of the various agencies and departments, CDC, FDA, HHS, that are focused on the issue, and that legislation is passed that makes sure that we break any of the bottlenecks that are out there. So I think the very first bill you're likely to see from the Biden administration will be COVID related, which I think is appropriate. And then, so what you're going to see is you're going to see the confirmations. The processes for the confirmations are already starting on our national security officials. The Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Defense will take some time because the nominated Secretary of Defense will require a waiver to be Secretary of Defense because he was a uniformed officer. But anyway, I do know that COVID relief will really be the top item on the agenda. Okay. What is my role in the new Congress? My role in the new Congress is my favorite job, which is representing the people of southwestern Connecticut. And, I will continue to do that to the best of my ability. I am really, really hopeful, and I keep getting disappointed in this regard, but I'm really, really hopeful that, item number 2 or 3 in the new Biden administration's agenda is transportation infrastructure, because we need that so badly. So I'm going to be pushing that, and we'll see where whatever else goes, where I wind up on which committees and what else I do. But my number one and most important role, obviously, is advocating for you and for the needs of Connecticut's 4th District. I was surprised to learn that the Constitution doesn't say that there must be a trial in the Senate. Are you sure there will be one? No, I'm not sure there will be one. First of all, remember, there's a couple of steps in this process. Articles have now been passed by the House, and so the president has been impeached. They have not been conveyed to the Senate, and the Speaker of the House has the authority to convey or not convey those articles of impeachment, or in this case, that article of impeachment, to the United States Senate. So, the speaker continues to have discretion as to how this goes. And then here I get on thin ice because it's a Senate thing, but I do think, well, I'm not sure, honestly, whether if the speaker conveys articles, the Senate is required to take it up. I'm under the impression that they are, but I don't want to go too much further because Senate procedure is not something I've got a PhD in. Okay, I am starting to see that we are out of questions, which is good because it's been 45 minutes. Let me close where I began. Check out, please, the website and the phone number that we have posted on this Facebook Live with respect to the vaccine. We're doing great in Connecticut relative to almost all of the other states. And we just need to keep that up. We need people who are at risk. We need people who could be spreaders to get vaccinated. So folks, stay safe, and I'll look forward to the next one of these that we do, which hopefully will be to talk primarily, if not exclusively, about the legislative initiatives coming down the pike in the new administration. Thanks, everyone.